Hey folks, thank you so much. I hope you're doing well and are safe and are at home. And the best thing about being at home is you get to see another episode of the Cal Country Show Quarantine. How you doing? I'm your host, Just Dave, right here in North Hollywood, California, which is coincidentally where the Palomino Club was, right down the street over there, not too long ago. And comic book artist Stephan Franck is here because he has created a brand new, up-and-coming comic book. I know, this is kind of strange. Normally we have musicians on this show, but we had to have them on to find out just what's going on. Stephan, how you doing over there?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm awesome. I know it's an unusual thing for me on the California Country Show to have a comic book artist, but it feels to me like we're going to find out that this is, we're both creative types. So where did this all come from?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in France, as you can probably hear. And my parents said when I was a little kid, had this comic book store, basically, that sold comics, books, toys, all that stuff. So, and they had like the French comics, the American comics, and I kind of fell in love with all that stuff. And then also I fell in love with music. When I was growing up in the 80s in France, like in Europe, there was this big rockabilly kind of revival with the Stray Cats, and it started that whole thing. So I got into that and I started playing rockabilly and got really serious about it.
So
and,
you're a musician too then? So
exactly.
What instrument did you play?
Guitar. And I started playing the clubs in France and stuff like that.
Yeah.
From rockabilly, you start drifting to different things. You find Sun Records, and from there, country music and all that stuff. And for me, the stuff that really captured my imagination was California country rock, like anything from like Emily Harris, Desert Rose Band, all that stuff.
Shout out to those guys. Absolutely. Yeah.
But really the bulk of my career was animation and comics, and so I moved to America in 1995, literally the year that the Palomino closed. And I started a career in animation here that's been going on ever since, and I got to work on fun stuff like the Iron Giant, for instance.
That's one of my favorite cartoons of like all time. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really special one. And also, while I was here, I was just like very close to the music that really like I'd fallen in love with. And so the Palomino was closed, but there were still clubs around. So for a long time, I was playing the clubs here, and I get to play with all these guys, and we were now friends and stuff like that. So the Palomino really sort of, and that tradition musically kind of really became part of my life,
Because I'm a little late. It's a little before my time. But when I got into town, I played with musicians that told me these great stories. So, I mean, how did you, I'm just trying to guess here, but I mean, you heard the stories as well.
One person that I really worked with a lot, who unfortunately passed away maybe 10 years ago, was Archie Francis, who was the drummer, basically, the Palomino for like 30 years, 40 years or whatever that was. Just amazing guy, amazing drummer. He was like the king of shuffle, basically. But he was also an amazing songwriter. And so I worked with him like the whole, like the last few years of his life, helped him produce his album, because he had never done an album of original songs, although he worked on like 1 billion sessions, So I got to experience that whole scene, but unfortunately a little bit after, you know what I mean? In the afterglow.
It became a legacy, and we do this all the time when I interview people. I interviewed JD Manis, he's a pedal steel player, with the Birds and Desert Rose Band, who you mentioned. And they seem to all kind of have that in mind. Like you could throw a rock and hit the next club that played music over here in the valley, and yet it's totally changed. So explain to me how you, as an artist, started to say this is something I need to start drawing.
So like the book, right, is it's a noir crime story. It's really an LA crime story, except, you always know, LA crime stories with like, hats and, fedoras and trench coats and stuff like that. And so, but having played in clubs since I was a teenager, I always knew that this was just an amazing setting for a noir story, because to me, noir characters, they're really like,
I'm going to share some of these pictures while you're talking. Keep going.
Great. Yeah. So, they have this very cynical kind of sense of humor, but really they're idealists. They're really like bleeding heart people. They're just super sensitive and they hide behind that thing, which is really what musicians are for the most part,
Oh, yeah. With the nudie suits and everything there. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that parking lot I'm thinking about too. You got the color scheme of a crime noir novel, but at the same time you've got the look of what we see. There's just the haze alone, and I don't know if people. I'm a comic book fan, so I'm a big fan. It goes with all the coloring and the ink, which you're very familiar with. But someone like me, just the glow of a neon sign. I mean, hardly do you see that done correctly. Look, there's a guy that looks like J.D. Manis right there. I mean, that's incredible. Looks like James Inbell.
There's Archie on the drums back there.
Oh, that's nice tribute. Very nice.
Yeah. So, that's the thing, right? I love noir stories. I felt like a club like the PAL, for many reasons, would be a perfect setting for it. It's also a big love letter to life in LA, and especially in the Valley, which has been my home for, 25 years. And I just really love this place. And so I think because all those elements that, and the last one too, is like when I was really starting to work on this book, because my youngest daughter was graduating college. And so, you turn that page as a parent and you go like, okay, well, that makes me want to look back on what that whole thing was, Yeah. And so it's a noir story with this guy who's he's the pedal steel player, like in the house band.
The lead guy is the pedal steel player in this story? There you go. Awesome. JD would be very, very happy to hear that. Yeah.
So he's the steel player at the PAL at night, but by day he's the former cop who was disgraced. Something happened, and now he's like this begrudging kind of PI. But also he's full-time father to this teenage daughter, and she's as badass and hard-boiled and kind of funny as she is. But of course she's kind of confused because she's a teenager. So together, it's really fun. So that relationship was really my way into the story. And the other thing
that's the teenage daughter right there. That's who we're.
That's a different character.
Oh, that's a different character. Got it. Yeah. I'm just a fan. I mean, I'm just. I got my Palomino shirt on right now. I mean, I'm the guy that goes to concerts wearing the band's T-shirt. I don't care. Say what you want about me.
Same.
But the culture itself, I just can't believe this hasn't been done yet. And you've kind of thought about this. It's fantastic.
So, from a historical standpoint, because I knew. Okay, so I've been living in LA for 25 years, so I think I have a good sense for the vibe of what it is to be here, right? Like my daughter's away from home, and when she saw the first images, she's like, "Oh, that makes me homesick." So I knew I was kind of onto something,
and we Valley people are tough, We Valley folks, like if you don't get it right, man, we'll tell you, I
mean, I've been blown away by the response. Like when we started posting stuff, people from the, Valley, preservation, like the Art Council, the Valley Relic, museum, all those places who really sort of celebrate this place, and its lore and its history, that I didn't know if they were going to love it or reject it. It was going to be one or the other,
What was the research that kind of said, this is the look, this is the feel?
So for this book, I've done something that I've never done before, which is that for the Palomino, for instance. So as you know, the club is closed, but the venue still exists as a banquet hall. So the sign, so it doesn't say Palomino, of course, but the sign itself is still there. The floor plan inside is the same. There you go. The stage is the same. The parking lot and all that stuff, right? So I went there, of course, and I walked around to kind of soak in the vibe and stuff. And I took pictures, 1 million pictures from everywhere.
To get the layout of the architecture and things like that. Oh yeah, that's smart. Yeah, very nice.
And then I took those pictures and I built a CGI model of the place.
Oh.
Yeah, so I got lucky because you can go to
this guy
Google
worked on Iron Giant, folks. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can go to Google Earth and you can get a satellite photo stuff. So you get basically the footprint of the block, so you can see where everything's the right size and everything.
So you designed a set
exactly
that existed in real life and made the comic fit that. That's incredible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. And once you have the sets, then you can have your your characters sort of like interact with the set and use the space, as well as I do. When you talk to people, like when you're doing a scene or, whatever, it's space is a participant.
I mean, everybody did this. Every musician that moved into the San Fernando Valley knew about the Palomino, looked it up on Google Maps, and went for it just to be able to tell the story. Here's the parking lot. Here's the thing. So everything I see is just like exactly as I would picture it would be. And then you just fill in the blanks. And now make a crime story about it.
That's the other part of it, right? So it takes place in 1981. And that's a very interesting period. Because, like the world goes through cycles and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely a cycle that started in after World War II and that ended in the mid 80s. And basically the story of the Palomino kind of mirrors that sort of life cycle.
Leaving that era. Plus you've got the aftermath of urban cowboy in that field too. Yeah. So there's a confusion there as well as what country music is, I imagine. And the look of stuff.
And I think people don't realize how much the image of the cowboy was still like prevalent. Mm-hmm. Every character that you see on TV is some version of the cowboy. Westerns are everywhere. I mean, like in those days, I was a kid myself, and in France, every like 3 nights a week it had a Western. And even Reagan, the president, was a cowboy. And
I know that very well about him. Yeah, I know.
Right? Really, like the cowboy was the image that the American century used to sell itself, to America itself, and to the rest of the world. And all of it was coming from California. That's what people may or may not realize. Like all the
West. It was the Wild West. Absolutely.
It was the Wild West. So when you have a place like the Pal, it's super fun because on the one hand, you look at it as a subcultural thing that people outside some of our circles may not know about. And yet it's at the center, it's at the crossroads of everything.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing to think that, because when I think about the Palomino and the changes that it went through, you would think that heyday of the Palomino would last forever, yet it turned into a punk club in the early 90s and things like that. So, I mean, clearly nothing lasts forever, and I imagine that's a pervading thing, especially around that confusing 80s period. Yet we talk to all our heroes and they just speak volumes of just what a great time it was to be alive and be partying back then too. That's amazing. Can we find this? Why is this not in stores yet? How is this happening? How are you what is happening with this story, Palomino?
Yeah. So all my books I release, through the world, through the stores, everything, through my own publishing company, which is called Dark Planet Comics. And you can always go to darkplanetcomics.com. And whenever a book is ready to go to press, I do a Kickstarter, so people can pre-order and stuff like that. So if you go to the Kickstarter website and you look for Palomino in the comics section, then you'll find us. Or if you go to the main website, darkplanetcomics.com, you'll get there.
And we'll have links below in the interview as well, folks. So when you go check that out, it's the American Dream right here, folks. It's called Palomino, and I got to say, anybody who are friends of mine that are musicians and fans of this culture, I'm sure they're going to find themselves in the pages of this comic. So I can't wait to see this. I appreciate it, Stephen. Thank you so much for joining me here.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Take care.